Now that we've built content.php with a basic structure and we're using our includes files in a very smart way so that we have headers and footers that can be repeated on every page, we're ready to look at database connectivity. And what I specifically want to do is get rid of this and NBSP semicolon, the non-breaking space, and put our navigation in there. Let's start building up the navigation. And once we're able to display all of the subjects and all of the pages, then we'll be able to make those into links. Once we make those into links, we'll be able to activate different parts of the content area so that we can edit a subject or edit a page. So let's get that navigation down first. And the first step to that is going to be database connectivity. And we looked at this previously. You can go back and review the PHP sandbox file if you need to, called databases.php. And we're going to follow that almost exactly. We're going to work through it right here. Remember, there's 5 steps that we need to follow. Before we even get to our functions, let's go ahead and do the first one of those, which is going to be PHP create a database connection. And you remember that? And I've got my same logging in as root and my password. And then the second step that we also follow at the very beginning is going to be select the database to use. So we've created the database connection, we've selected the database to use, then we load in our functions, and then we start outputting our page. So that's steps 1 and 2. You'll remember that we already had steps 3 and 4, and that's going to be where we use the data, and that's going to happen here in the navigation area. So let's go ahead and just drop in what we had before. You can pull up that same file if you need to get the same query and everything. I'm just going to go ahead and pull my PHP over a little bit so that it's more centered in the middle of my screen. But I've got step 3 where we're performing the database query, and we're going to ask for all of the subjects. That's in fact the first thing that we want to do here. And then I'm going to use the returned data, and you can see where I've just simply going to output the menu name and the position. And then if you'll remember, the last step that we want to follow is going to be down here at the very end where we close our database connection. So go ahead and review that and make sure you understood what happened. But at the very top, we're going to open up that connection. We're going to select the database we want to use. Then we're going to start our page. We're going to do all our queries and display all our data. And at the very end, we'll close out that connection. So let's go ahead and just save that and see what we get back. We'll go to Firefox. We're on content.php. And sure enough, we got our subjects that we've loaded in about Widget Corp products and services with their position numbers. So already we've been able to make a database connection and have some instant gratification by putting those subjects over in our navigation bar. Now, we just learned about how we can use includes files to make our life easier. And this seems like a perfect case for it. Every time we're going to connect to the database, we're going to do these exact same steps again. So this is a classic example of something that belongs in an includes file. So let's go ahead and actually cut that out of there. I'll go to Edit and Cut. And then I'm going to create a new document. And we'll paste it in there. Here we go. And then I'll just save that in my includes directory. Widget Corp includes. And we're going to call the file connection.php. We could call it db connection or dbcon, something like that. But I'm going to call it connection.php. And that's going to create my database connection. I'll save it. Now, I'm not going to close it yet. I'm just going to move it to the side. I'm going to switch back over here, and I'm going to just copy my require once that I used before, because I'm going to once again use require once. I only need to do this one time, and I'm going to load in connection.php before I do my functions. Now, my query is going to change every time because I'm going to be doing different operations on my database. And how I'm going to use that data will change every time. So that's not a great candidate for an include file or require file. But the footer down here below the footer, where we actually close the connection, that is going to be the same every time. And in fact, we can go ahead and just put that in our footer. Why not? We're going to do it every time at the bottom of every page. Why not just put it in our footer? So I'm just going to copy that out of there. We'll save that document. I'm going to just switch back over here to where I can see my files, and I'm going to open up footer.php, and right below the bottom of the HTML, I'll just go ahead and close the connection right there. Now, this solution will work for us, and it's going to work fine for us as long as we're connecting to a database. But we do want to keep in mind here that we've asked for a variable, connection. And if we had not opened up a database connection up above our header at the top of our file, then this would give us an error. So let's go ahead and just put in a little bit of error proofing while we're here. And let's just say if is set connection, right? So we'll just test to see if it's set. And then if it's set, then we'll close out the connection. So in the case when it's not set, it won't try and close it. Makes sense, right? That'll give us a flexible footer, and now we can go ahead and use this HTML safely on any page, even pages which might not have called the database first. So let's say we just have a static text page, but we want to grab that footer. We can do it without fear. Let's go ahead and close our footer now. There we go. And now I don't even have to put an include here. But now that I have some PHP in there, I might want to change this to actually be a require instead. Now, I don't have to, because in truth, I don't have to close the database connection. That's an optional fifth step. It's good practice to go ahead and do that. But if we were not to include it and not to close it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. PHP would go ahead and say, okay, I think you're probably done with that, and dispose of the connection. So I'm going to just change it to be a require, not a require once. If it were required twice, it wouldn't be the end of the world. So I'm just going to upgrade it one step from include to require. So now, once again, we've slimmed down our content.php so that we have just the content that's unique to this page to work with. And that gives us, again, a slimmer workspace, and it's a lot easier to find what might be going wrong in this page if we're having problems, because we've moved so many things off to other files. I'm going to close content.php. I'm just going to bring up connection.php. And I just want to show you a way that we can actually improve this one step further. And it might not be immediately obvious. We talked before about having constants and how constants could define a value that would always be the same for that one page executing. For the duration of that page, the constant would be locked in. One technique that I really like a lot, and which is considered a best practice, is to go ahead and move some of this information here, like localhost, root, and our password, out of our database connection file. That will then make our database connection file reusable when we build other websites as well. So we're kind of thinking ahead to where we might be going if we're going to develop a lot more of these. And the way we can do that is by creating another file that's going to hold those constants in it, and then we'll just bring them in. Now we can certainly use variables, but we're going to use constants. I'm going to do another new file, and I'm going to save that file again in my widget corp includes, and I'm going to call it constants.php. And this is where I can include all of the constants about my website. And it's going to be a bit like having a preferences file. So if I want to change the password to my database, I'll be able to just go directly into here and do it. So in constants.php, I'm just going to drop in some basic PHP. So what I've done here is defined a constant called db_server as localhost. I've given my root, my user, my password, my name. I went ahead and put all of those as constants. And then I can actually call that over here at the top of my connection. And I can say require, right? And this time it's in the same directory as connection. So I don't need to refer to the includes directory. I can just say constants.php. And that'll make sure that I have those constants loaded up. And then, instead of referring to localhost here, I can refer to it by its constant name. So it's going to be all capitals, no $sign in front of it, no quotes around it. And we'll do the same thing with user. I'm just copying and pasting these in place of what's there. And let's go ahead and do the password. There we are. And last of all, the database name. There we are. So now, if you take a look at my connection.php file, you can see I've removed everything that's actually going to vary site to site out of that file and made it more flexible. This may not benefit us a whole lot for this website, but then we can actually reuse this code when we work on other websites. And the real benefit will be that we can make all our changes inside the constants file. So if our password changes, or once we decide to deploy it to a production server, we can change all that information right here in this one simple file. So our database file is being included by our web pages, and then that file is also including the database constants. So now we successfully used our database skills in order to create the first part of our navigation, a listing of the subjects. And we've used our include and require skills to not repeat ourselves by moving some of that database connectivity off into our includes files, and even improved that further by moving the information about our login and password into our constants file. So we're ready to start improving our navigation a lot further. The one thing I want to caution you about is that we've just put our database password into our constants file. So if someone were to be able to get access to our web server and get access to that file, they would have our database password and be able to get into all of our database information. So there are a number of techniques that are server administration techniques that I'm not going to go into here, but we can do something called an htaccess file, which will tell Apache not to allow outside requests to access that file to see the constants file. We can also move that constants file somewhere else outside of this directory and reference it there. But for now, just bear in mind that we've put our password in a place that potentially might not be secure, and keep that fact in mind before you deploy it to the world. So now we've successfully used all of our database skills to generate the very beginnings of our navigation menu by listing off the subjects. And we've worked smart by moving sections off of that using the don't repeat yourself idea into includes files. And we've improved that even further by moving some of that database information into our constants file. Now we're ready to work on the navigation menu further and try and get the pages to display below each of those subjects. And that's what we'll do next.